I want to dedicate this Parsha podcast in the merit of the wonderful soldiers and reservists that are currently once again heading into Gaza to fight our enemies and to hopefully thoroughly vanquish them. They should be successful in their holy venture. They should be safe. They should come back to their families strong and untainted and unblemished and uninfluenced in any negative way. And please God, the hostages who have been suffering so tremendously for so long can finally be reunited with their families in good health and in good spirits. We owe a great debt of gratitude to these wonderful men, primarily men, some women as well, I understand, who are on the front lines of this horrific and dreadful war. We hope the Almighty protects them every single moment of every single day. I scarcely remember being as excited for our Parsha podcast as this one. But before we start, we can't forget it's the month of Elul, and that means that this morning, during Shachris, they blew the shofar, and usually I wait till after davening, and I ask the guy to blow it again, and it's a little bit awkward because there's still some people in the shul, and he's blowing shofar again. This time I snuck up with my recorder as he was blowing for everyone, and I was standing there looking a little bit sheepish, I'm sure, but I got a recording, and this is what it sounds. This is the shofar from this morning. Those hallowed sounds are designed to give us the encouragement and the boost that we need to remember that it is the month before Rosh Hashanah. It's high time that we wake up, we are roused from our spiritual slumber, and we get ready for the high holidays which are upcoming. But now it's Parsha's Seitzei. It's a bonanza Parsha. There are so many things to talk about. There are more mitzvahs in this week's Parsha than in any other Parsha, and there's such wonderful diversity of mitzvos. And I started to write down a list, an incomplete list of some of the mitzvahs in our Parsha. It starts off with the laws of the beautiful captive woman. And then there's the inheritance of the firstborn. Double. He gets double no matter whom is his mother. We have the law of the wayward and rebellious son, the ben sorer umoreh. The instruction to hang executed criminals, some of them, but to bury them on the same day. Returning lost objects, hashavas aveda, tending to your friends' animals when they need help, against cross-dressing, sending away the mother bird before you take the babies or the eggs, building a fence around your roof, not mixing seeds when planting, not mixing animals when working, not wearing a garment mixed of wool and linen, the law of a husband, God forbid, slandering his wife, the law of a rapist, the law of a eunuch, the law of a bastard, the laws pertaining to the nations of Ammon, Moab, Edom, and the Egyptians. An impure person cannot enter Temple Mount. In war, you have to arrange a wash closet. You cannot descend to living like something less than a glorious human. You cannot return an escaped slave to his master. The ineligibility of sacrifices from a harlot's fair and money paid for a dog. No interest-bearing loans to fellow Jews. Adhering to your vows. Allowing farmhands to eat from the produce they're picking. Divorce with divorce documents, prohibition against remarrying after divorce if there was a marriage in between, special protocol for newlywed grooms during the first year of marriage, all variety of laws of collateral. You cannot take vital tools for collateral. You cannot take garments of a widow for collateral. You cannot withhold collateral from a poor borrower. You cannot excise that tsaras. You must pay laborers every day. The ineligibility of relatives to testify regarding each other, to not corrupt the judgment of a convert and an orphan, to leave the forgotten and dropped produce for the poor to collect, to punish the guilty with lashes, but no more than required, against muzzling animals during work, and the laws of levirate or levirate marriage, when one brother dies without children. The widow shall not marry until her status is resolved with either Yibbum, levirate marriage, or Chalitzah, what I'm calling levirate divorce. And 3 more laws to save a victim being pursued, even if it requires killing the pursuer. The requirement to maintain balanced weights and measures, and remember the atrocities of Amalek, never forget them, and eradicate this mortal enemy of our people. There is so much to talk about in this week's Parsha. It's an embarrassment of riches, but I want to focus on something that I don't think we ever spoke about at length in the many hundreds of podcast episodes that the Almighty enabled me to record. A fascinating and very bizarre sounding set of laws that are so completely foreign to us, laws that we hope to never have the chance to fulfill, but laws that when we go deep on them, we discover absolutely fascinating secrets, fascinating insights that remarkably make the subject actually very, very relevant to us. And that is Yibbum, levirate marriage, and Chalitzah, what I'm calling levirate divorce. In 6 verses in our Parsha, chapter 25, verses 6 through 10, we read about Yibbum, levirate marriage. It starts off, there are 2 brothers who are living together, and one of them dies. Ubein ein lo, and he has no son, has no children. Lo tiyeh eshes hamesa chutza li'ish zar. The wife of the dead shall not marry someone else, of a foreigner. Instead, her brother-in-law should marry her and take her for him as a wife and perform Yibbum, levirate marriage. You have 2 brothers, one dies. The widow, the Torah tells us, should not marry a stranger. Rather, her brother-in-law, the surviving brother, the deceased husband's brother, should marry her. Keep it in the family. And then, the next verse tells us, Va'ya b'char, the firstborn of that new union, the brother, the surviving brother, and his sister-in-law, they'll have a baby, and that child will be established on the name of the dead brother, V'lo yimachesh mo Yisrael, and his name will not be erased from Israel. Right off the bat, we understand that this is a very intriguing mitzvah. In the Torah, there are all sorts of relationships that are banned. There are people that you cannot marry, you cannot consort with, and one of them is a sister-in-law. But in this case, if a person's brother, God forbid, dies without children, in that case, the Torah waives the prohibition against marrying your sister-in-law, and the widow shall remarry into the same family as her deceased husband. She should marry her brother-in-law, the brother of her now dead husband, and then they will please not have a child who will be named after the dead brother, after the first husband. Those are the first 2 verses in this section. But, continues the Torah, Ve'im lo yachpo tza'ish, if the man is not desirous to marry his sister-in-law, well then she goes to court, and she says to the judges, my brother-in-law has refused to establish for his brother, i.e. for my deceased husband, he refused to establish for him a name in Israel. He did not want to marry me. And then this brother who is resisting, who's refusing to marry his sister-in-law, he is summoned by the court, and they speak to him, and he gets up and he announces, I don't want to marry her. Then something very strange happens. The sister-in-law, the widow, in front of the judges, she removes his shoe, and she spits in front of him, and she proclaims, so shall be done to the man who does not build the house of his brother. In the final verse of this section, the brother, the recalcitrant, resistant brother, is given an ignominious name. He is known thenceforth amongst Israel as Beis Chalutz Hanal, the house of the removed shoe. This is a most unusual and strange and quite inexplicable ceremony. A man dies without children. Very sad, very tragic. The widow cannot marry anyone until her status is resolved. Either she marries her brother-in-law, the surviving brother of her husband, levirate marriage, or she does this process known as Chalitzah. We're calling it levirate divorce. She removes his shoe. She spits in front of him. She proclaims, "Such shall be done to the man who does not build the house of his brother." And from that point on, she can marry whoever she wants, and the brother is given the title of Beis Chalusanal, the house of the removed shoe. So absolutely strange, bizarre, mysterious. What can possibly be the deeper meaning? So if you open up Rashi doesn't explain. You open up the Ramban, and he says one sentence. The subject of Yibbum, of levirate marriage, and Chalitzah, what we're calling levirate divorce, this process, the ceremony of removing the shoe and spitting in front of him and making the proclamations, this I already explained in Genesis. So if you want to know more about it, read my commentary to Genesis chapter 38, verse 8. Now I was very curious about this particular subject. So I went to Genesis. And chapter 38, verse 8, it's talking about a brother who died without children. This is Judah's son. His name is Er. And he's married to a woman named Tamar. And Er dies childless. And verse 8 of that aforementioned chapter says, Vayomer Yehuda, and Judah said to his son Onan, the surviving brother, marry your sister-in-law and establish progeny for your brother. This is exactly what we're reading about over here in chapter 25 of Devarim. And Onan, the next son, does. But unfortunately, he too dies without progeny. Why does he die without progeny? So the verse tells us that he understood that the children would not be his, and therefore he made sure he took steps to ensure that she will not become pregnant. And God was upset, this was sinful, and he died as well. So Judah's left with only one son, Shelah. And instead of suggesting that Tamar, the widow now twice over, marries his third son, he sends her away. Shelah's too young. I'll send you a postcard when he's ready. Now, Tamar is very desirous of bearing a child from the family of Judah. And when that postcard fails to arrive, she takes drastic action. She impersonates a prostitute. She seduces Judah, who fails to recognize her. She gets impregnated, and after a very close call with death, she has twins, Peretz and Zerach, sons of Judah and Tamar. Now, these are very significant people, especially Peretz, because his son was Chetzron, and his son was Ram, and his son was Aminadav, and then came Nachshon and Salma and Boaz and Oved and Yishai, Jesse. 9 generations after Judah and Tamar were united in this very unusual way, David was born. David, the anointed Mashiach Hashem, the Messiah of God, King of Israel, forebearer of Messiah, whom we are waiting is born from this union. And here, Rashi tells us, go to my commentary in Genesis chapter 38. There I spoke about this subject. Well, what does he actually say? The first thing he says, what does it mean that Judah tells his surviving son, go establish progeny for your deceased brother? He explains that does not mean that the name of the firstborn son is the same name as the deceased brother. And he explains, there are 2 known instances of Yibbum, of levirate marriage. As we shall see, Judah himself unwittingly fulfilled levirate marriage, and he had 2 sons, neither of them who were named after the widow's deceased husbands. And Boaz and Ruth, that was an instance of Yibbum of levirate marriage, and Ruth's first husband was Machlon, and her son was Oved. That's not the same name. So it obviously does not mean the goal of levirate marriage is not to have living progeny who will have the same name as the person who died childless. And then he says, there's something very unusual. Onan, the second son of Judah, the verse says in chapter 38 of Genesis, he knew that he would not be the bearer of progeny. He had some sort of knowledge. He didn't say it. He knew that he would not have any children. So what does that mean? And then the Ramban drops a line that gets our attention. I'll read it to you in Hebrew. Aval ha'inyan, the matter, the subject of levirate, marriage and divorce. Sod gadol, it's a great secret. Misodos haTorah, of the secrets of the Torah. This subject is a great secret from the secrets of the Torah, and it is evident to the eyes of those to whom Hashem gave eyes to see and ears to hear. When the Ramban says that, we perk up. There's a secret here, a great secret from the secrets of the Torah. And what's the secret? Will he tell us? Let's continue. The Ramban continues and says that the early sages, before the giving of the Torah at Sinai, before Deuteronomy, they knew that there was great benefit in the marriage of the brother to his deceased brother's wife. Now, what's the benefit? He doesn't tell us. That's the secret. That's the great secret of the secrets of the Torah. Continues the Ramban. The brother of the deceased husband, he should come first. To fulfill this great benefit, who has the first right to do it? It's the brother, but he's not the exclusive one to do it. If he doesn't want to do it, then some other relative should do it. The benefit, this great benefit, is gleaned from any one of the deceased husband's relatives. And even before Sinai, they knew that. And that's why Judah himself, he's a relative of Tamar's deceased husbands. He's the father. The Ramban cites the Midrash that Judah was the first person to fulfill the concept of Yibbum of levirate marriage. Even though he's not the brother, he's the father, but he's a relative. And how did Judah know this secret? Well, he learned it from his ancestors, and he rushed to fulfill it. Now, this is all before Sinai. But at Sinai, this idea, this concept, this great secret of levirate marriages, it was limited from all the relatives. No, it's just the brother of the deceased, because that's where the benefit is greatest. We're discovering over here that the concept of levirate marriage is a great secret. There is tremendous benefit in it. And conceptually, it's not only if it's done by the brother of the deceased, but by all relatives. And thus, when Judah consorted with Tamar as the relative, as the father of her husbands, he fulfilled the benefit of levirate marriage. And of course, once Torah is codified for us at Sinai, thenceforth, levirate marriage is limited to only brothers. Well, what's the secret? What's this great secret? Sod gadol misodos haTorah. What actually is the great benefit of levirate marriage? The Ramban has not yet revealed it to us. The secret was known to Judah. He was told it by his ancestors. And the Ramban says, well, anyone who Hashem has given eyes to see and ears to hear, well, they can see it plainly. But so far, we have no idea what the secret is. Now, the Ramban continues to explain the concept of levirate divorce. What about when the living relative is not interested in marrying the widow? The surviving brother is not interested in marrying his sister-in-law. Well, in that case, Chalitzah is done. She removes his shoe, she spits on the ground in front of him, and she says, so shall be done to the man who refuses to build the house of his brother. Well, what's that all about? Says the Ramban. It's considered terrible cruelty when the surviving brother does not want to fulfill this mitzvah. And he is called derisively, Beis Chalutz Hanal, the house of the removed shoe, because he has kind of removed the obligation. And it's fitting, says the Ramban, that this be done with a shoe. Now, it doesn't tell us why. It makes sense that this will be done with a shoe. This is all still a mystery. And the final line of the Ramban, the sages of yore, before Sinai, they knew this important matter, and they performed it with all relatives, meaning not just brothers. And they had a name for it. They called it Geula, which means redemption. And this is what happened with Boaz and Ruth. And he ends, V'hamaskil yavin, and the insightful one will understand. Wow. What a piece. But of course, questions abound. What actually is the secret, this great secret of the secrets of the Torah? What is this great benefit in the widow marrying her brother-in-law, or even before Sunday, other relatives? What does it actually mean that the firstborn son will be named, so to speak, after the deceased brother? If it doesn't mean the actual name, Peretz and Zerach were not called Er and Onan. Oved was not called Machlon. Well, if it doesn't mean that, well, what does it mean? Why is another term for this process called Geula, redemption? What does it mean that Onan knew for sure that he won't be the bearer of the progeny? And of course, the Chalitzah, what's that secret? Why is it an act of cruelty, and why must it be done with a shoe? Our quest continues. So I'll tell you a little secret that will help us unpack this. Whenever the Ramban in his commentary references a secret and doesn't elaborate, what you need to train yourself is to go to the commentary of Rabbeinu Bechaya, because he will always invariably elaborate and explain the secret. So he has an essay on Yibbum, on levirate marriage. And he says there's a simple way to understand it, and there's a midrashic way to understand it. And then there's a secret, Kabbalistic way to understand it. And this secret, he tells us, comes from our tradition, and thus it is incontrovertible. Because we heard the secret from the sages, and the sages heard it from the prophets, and they heard it all the way back to Moshe. This is a secret from Sinai. Here's the secret. Yibbum, levirate marriage, is a great kindness of God. It's a way to ensure that all souls merit the great, elevated, lofty light. It's a way to make sure that all souls find a pathway, find an entrance into Olam Haba, into the world to come. The soul of the dear departed husband is missing something. It is not a candidate to achieve its eternal state of perfection. And therefore, that soul has to come back to finish its mission. And only then can it earn its place in the eternal world. The husband's soul, the dead husband's soul, needs to be reincarnated. And the best place for it to come back to, and the great benefit bestowed upon it, is when it comes back to familiar territory, where it comes back to the family. This is the secret, the great secret of all the secrets of the Torah. The reason for Yibbum, for levirate marriages, it's to enable and facilitate and aid the brother/husband's soul in its eternal quest to achieve perfection and to end up where it needs to end up at, as it needs to come back. It needs to be reincarnated. And God, in His infinite wisdom and magnanimity, He designed the perfect arrangement. The wife of the deceased, bone from his bone, flesh from his flesh, and his brother will collaborate to bring him back. The firstborn son will be named after the deceased, not Bob or Joe or Machlon or Er or Onan. The name means the essence, the soul. The soul of the firstborn son will not be a new soul. It'll be the brother's soul, the husband's soul, coming back for a second chance to achieve its perfection. And that's what it means to build the house of the brother. The deceased brother's house, his spiritual edifice, needs building. He needs to be here again to have his house fully built. He did not achieve perfection in his first lifetime. Or maybe he achieved some modicum of perfection, but not sufficient perfection in his first lifetime. Or maybe he has some outstanding debts that are best paid here and not in the spiritual world. Regardless of what specific reason he needs to come back for, brother number one, the deceased husband, needs a second chance. Needs a second go at it. And levirate marriage, Yibbum, that is the best way for it to be done. The verse tells us, the wife should not marry someone else. She should marry her brother-in-law. And then the son born will have an old soul, the soul of the deceased brother, of the deceased husband. And his house, his spiritual house, will be built in this go-round. That's levirate marriage. The son born to his brother and widow will bear his soul. He'll have a second chance. Now, Judah knew this idea. Onan knew this idea. He knew he would not be bringing back a new soul, only the soul of his brother. He knew this secret. And he didn't want to do it. That is the secret of Yibbum. Now, when the brother opts out, there is a protocol for it. It's called Chalitzah. We said we're calling it levirate divorce. Maybe the strangest of all ceremonies. What could possibly be the deeper meaning of Chalitzah? So the commentaries reveal to us. When the brother says, I don't want to help my dead brother, my deceased brother, that's an act of cruelty. And the word Chalitzah, it means to throw away. He's casting away the brotherhood. And the word na'al, which means a shoe, also means lock. He is locking the door. He's slamming the door shut in front of the soul of his deceased brother. And the shoe, well, that is, of course, removed from the foot. The foot symbolizes walking. The brother, the dead brother, his soul has to walk and find a different family to be reborn to. And the widow signals how the Torah views this person. She spits in front of him, not at him, in front of him. It's a sign of revulsion and disgust for the brother who refuses to take responsibility for the soul of his deceased brother. And he earns the epithet, Beis Chalutz Hanal, the house of the discarded shoe. Now, the Kabbalists reveal to us further that there's even deeper secrets here. The shoe is to the foot what the soul is to the body. And when there is a process of insertion of a soul into a body, it's akin to the insertion of a foot into a shoe. Now, you look around, you can see a lot of shoes moving, but really we know it's not the shoe moving, it's the foot inside the shoe moving. That's the dynamic one. The desire, the will, the movement, the action, the dynamism comes from the foot, and the shoe just follows. And the relationship of shoe and foot is they're connected, they move in unison, they're bound together, but really they're separate. Oh, and I've heard rumors that there are some people that have multiple pairs of shoes. Just as it's possible for a person to have 10 pairs of shoes with only 2 feet, even though it's not possible to have the opposite, right? You can't really have 10 pairs of feet and only 1 shoe, right? I don't know. Has any of us ever seen a person with more than 2 feet? You have 2 feet, that's it, 1 set. But he could have 50 pairs of shoes, I've heard. Similarly, one soul could have multiple bodies. And when the brother refuses to marry his sister-in-law, refuses to bring back the soul of the departed brother, the shoe is undone. He's undoing the shoe. He's untying the shoe. He's preventing that soul from coming back to that body. I will add one more point that the Kabbalists here don't mention. We know that the soul is comprised of really 5 little mini-souls. There are 5 parts, 5 components of a soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And not all of those parts of the soul, which are intercalated like links in a chain, not all of them are inside the body. If I were to ask you to estimate what percentage of your body is inside your footwear, so if you're a Texan, you got boots, maybe it's a higher percentage. Maybe it's 10%. But the majority of your body is outside of your footwear. You have little flats or sneakers, flip-flops. Most of your body's outside of it. The higher parts of our soul are way outside of our body. The Rabban told us that the proper way to signify that the brother is opting out is with the shoe. Now we know the secret. I want to go to the next realm, to the next dimension. The mitzvah of the levirate marriage has an assumption to it. There's an assumption that the soul of the deceased brother needs to come back. And the only question is, well, which family? Will it be in-house or some other family? we assume that the deceased man's soul has some gaps in its perfection and it needs a second chance. So why does it matter if he has children or not? Why is it that this law teaches us that if he does not have children, well, necessarily he must come back, he must be reincarnated? Well, what if he has children? Why doesn't a person who dies with children need a second chance as well? I think there's a major insight over here. After a person passes, they are no longer a candidate to do mitzvos, to achieve perfection, to achieve elevation, to achieve refinement. That is true if they don't leave any living progeny. But if someone dies with children, the mitzvos and the perfection and the elevation and the refinement of the children help aid and assist their deceased parent or father in heaven achieve their perfection. We know, God forbid, someone's parent dies, we say Kaddish for a whole year. Why? Because you play a vital role to ensure that your parent's soul finds its place of rest. But when someone, God forbid, dies childless, there are no heirs to give him a boost in heaven. He must come back one way or another. Now, I had a question. What if, God forbid, someone dies without children, but he was a completely righteous person? What if he perfected himself completely? Is it possible that someone does not need to come back for a second go-round? They did everything they need to do? So I did a little research in this question, and I found the Zohar talks about it. And what the Zohar says is mind-bending. If there is a person who is completely righteous, has all the qualities, perfect himself from all shortcomings and flaws, right away he's ushered to his place in heaven. No questions asked. So why would his wife need to marry the brother, or why would he need to come back? He already achieved his perfection. So the Zohar gives two answers. The first answer is very basic. Well, we don't know. Who are we to judge? Do we really know if someone does not need to come back? How do we know that? Maybe he was perfect, but maybe he wasn't. And therefore, we have to suspect that there's a possibility, maybe there's some reason that soul needs to come back. And then he says something absolutely wild. Suppose a person dies childless but flawless. We know their soul right away is ushered to its earned place in heaven. But of course, only God knows that. We don't know. We assume, well, his wife is here and she needs to marry her brother-in-law. Well, if they have a child, that soul will not be the soul of the deceased brother because he does not need to come back over here. There's a pool. There's a pool of souls who died childless and were never redeemed and never got a chance to come back. And when someone who's completely righteous dies childless and their wife goes and remarries and has a child, that soul is not from the widow's deceased husband, but it's from that pool of people that needed to come back and had no avenue to come back. How wild is that? I want to try to bring this home with one final question. And then a little bombshell insight. There seems to be a deep connection between levirate marriage and Messiah. As far as I'm aware, there's only 2 recorded instances of Yibbum of levirate marriage ever done. The Talmud says that we don't do levirate marriage anymore. A person has to be so pure-minded to make sure that they're completely selfless. Even 2,000 years ago, the great sages of the Talmud said, no, we just opt for Chalitzah, for levirate divorce. The 2 recorded instances of Yibbum, of levirate marriage, are Judah and Tamar, 9 generations to David, and Boaz and Ruth, 4 generations to David. It seems like the ingredients to make Messiah, part of it, a crucial part of it, is this. And the answer is obvious. The act of Yibbum, of levirate marriage, is the ultimate act of selflessness. To completely self-abnegate and dedicate everything for another person. To be totally selfless and to take responsibility for someone else's soul that needs help. To take responsibility for a brother. That quality is the essence of Messiah. King Messiah is going to arrive at a world that needs a lot of work. Every soul needs perfection, needs elevation, needs refinement. Everyone's so pockmarked with problems. And it's going to be Messiah's job to take responsibility and rectify and bring salvation and redemption to everyone. To take responsibility for the whole world, for the whole nation. That's what's expected of Messiah. One of the names of Yibbum is Geula, redemption. It's the act of redeeming a soul in crisis. Of taking a soul that has no path and carving a path for it. Messiah is the Redeemer. He redeems all the souls that need elevation and perfection. And it's no coincidence that in his pedigree, it's studded with these acts of self-sacrifice. One more final observation. Chalitzah, that's the act of eschewing responsibility. And I thought that was kind of clever, eschewing. You do it with a shoe. I know some people say eschew, but it's more correct to say eschew. It's eschewing responsibility. It's saying, well, there is a soul in crisis, and I can help it, but I cannot just completely negate my own agenda and dedicate everything for someone else. I can't do it. Let that foot find a different shoe. Not my problem. Where is the first reference to Chalitzah in the Torah? Now, that's maybe too difficult of a question. Where is the first reference to a shoe strap in the Torah? In chapter 14 of Genesis, Abraham participates in a world war, 4 kings against 5 kings, and he wins. And he has everything. He has all the spoils of war and all the people of war. And the king of Sodom says to him, Ten li hanefesh, give me the souls, v'arechush kach lach, and you take all the spoils. And Abraham says, I don't want anything. And I don't want not the people, not the spoils. And he lets all the captives, all the prisoners of war, go back to their idolatrous ways. What does Abraham tell king of Sodom? I don't want you to say that I made Abraham rich. I'm not going to take michut v'ad sroch nal. I'm not going to take not a string and not a shoe strap. And the Talmud tells us that Abraham made a big mistake. Nidarim, page 32a, the Talmud is trying to investigate why was Abraham punished by having his descendants being enslaved in Egypt. And the Talmud offers three opinions. And one opinion says that Abraham made a grave error by forfeiting the souls. Because had he taken those souls, he would have trained them in the ways of faith. He should have kept all the souls by him and entered them under the wings of the Shekhinah. What did he say? I'm not going to take not a string and not a shoe strap. Shoe strap. Chalitzah tell us in the Midrash, not in the Talmud. The Talmud says something else about this question. In the merit of Abraham saying, I will not take a shoe strap, he earned for his descendants the mitzvah of Chalitzah. There's a very deep point over here. There were souls in crisis. And Abraham said, I'm not taking it. I'm opting out. And therefore he established the concept of Chalitzah. And he, I think, also paved the way for us to say, maybe it's too much for me to take responsibility that demands complete self-sacrifice. Abraham paved the path of saying, okay, I cannot do that. Now, my observation is, we know that there are three epochs of history. It's a 6,000-year world, 2,000 years of tohu, of chaos, of emptiness, 2,000 years of Torah, and 2,000 years of Mashiach, a Messiah. And we know that there are three people who symbolize these three eras. Abraham, he ended the emptiness and the chaos. Moshe, he, of course, brought for us the Torah. And Mashiach, a Messiah. And these three, of course, Rashi tells us, they all ride on a donkey. These are the three epochs of history that are symbolized, so to speak, by this traveling and using the same means of transportation. We talked about that already in the past. Maybe Moshe also did a chalitzah of sorts at the burning bush. God told Moshe, go save the nation. Now Moshe ultimately agreed. But Moshe objected, he resisted. And what did God tell him? Chapter 3 of Exodus, Shal nalcha me'al ragalcha, take your shoe off your foot. Maybe we can suggest, we know our sages already tell us, that on some levels, Messiah will outshine Moshe. He won't be as great of a prophet, but he'll be greater in other areas. When we did our big series on Messiah, we spoke about this at length. Abraham did Chalitzah. Moshe, maybe we could say, did Chalitzah as well. Messiah, on some level, is the greatest of the three. His pedigree is that of Yibbum, of levirate marriage, and that's what he will do completely for the entire nation, for the entire world. I think there are some amazing lessons for us. There's an assumption in this mitzvah. Most people who live their life and end it and hand their soul back to heaven have not fulfilled their mission completely, and therefore don't really have a path, at least initially, to arrive at their destiny. And if they have children, the children need to know that their deceased parents are counting on them. They must help them. And God forbid someone dies childless, we have a whole mitzvah, a whole new concept of how to aid their soul in achieving its destiny. And what's expected of the brother is a degree of selfless responsibility that's so lofty it has a messianic quality to it. And of course, we hope to never have a situation where this would be pertinent, but certainly on a conceptual level, we see about the great quality of when others are in need, when others face an existential need, and you can help them. But to do so, you have to give of yourself. You have to forfeit of yourself. You have to be selfless. If you want to partner with Messiah, take responsibility for your brother. What an idea. What a subject. What secret of the secrets of the Torah. And now for the dilemma. Towards the beginning of our Parsha, we read about the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward and rebellious son. He's gluttonous, he's eating, he's drinking in bad company. He's executed. Why is he executed? Well, Talmud tells us. He is on a certain trajectory at his age, in his circumstance, where eventually he'll become a murderer. And thus, we know for sure that this person will be executed. Yamus zakai va'al yamus chayiv. Let him die innocent and not guilty. But there's one condition. The parents have to grab him and bring him to court voluntarily. And if the parents say, we choose to not bring our child, they have the right to say, we choose to not adjudicate this law. It's completely in their hands. And here's the dilemma. It's a theoretical dilemma. The Talmud says that the Ben Somer never happened, never will happen. But it's a dilemma that a parent of a would-be Ben Sorer Umoreh would have. The Torah is telling us, you know for sure, 100%, that your child, who's rebellious and on a wrong path, you know he's going to become a criminal guilty of capital punishment. Are you willing to give up on him or not? That's the dilemma that faces the parents of a child in this circumstance. And the Talmud tells us that the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward and rebellious son, lo haya v'lo asilios, never happened and never will happen. Never happened. And the commentaries tell us the only way that it can happen, the only way, is if the parents both agree to bring him to court. And parents who have such a high degree of faith in God, to believe God 1,000,000%, well, parents like that will never end up with such a child. And the parents who don't have complete, total, utter reliance on God, well, they won't bring him. So it never happened and never will happen. But it is interesting that this law, which is also very impractical, never happened, never will happen. There's a lesson for us. And the aforementioned Rabbeinu Bechaya has a whole essay on this. The lesson is to rely on God and to love Him, and to love Him even more than the thing that we love more than anything else, of course, that is our children. I appreciate your time and attention for this Parsha podcast. This week is Parsha's Seitzei, which means we have Kisavo, and then Nitzavim and Vayelech are together because it's not a leap year. Ha'azinu v'zos habracha. We have 4 Parshios left for the 9th year of the Parsha podcast. I'm very happy to announce, with the help of the Almighty, that we were renewed for another season. Please God, we'll have a 10th year with the help of the Almighty, with a brand new theme that I'm not quite at liberty to divulge quite yet. But good news! Please God, we'll have the Parsha podcast next year as well. Have a wonderful day. A magnificent, terrific, and splendid, and uplifting, and powerful Shabbos. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, who's helped us all the way through this, we'll gather together again next week for a Parsha podcast. And as always, my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.